nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses. No expression, no expression. Hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad children waiting for the day they feel good. Happy birthday, happy birthday. And I feel the way that every child should sit and listen, sit and listen. Went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. Hello teacher, tell me what's my lesson. Look right through me, look right through me. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad.
Wow. Gut-wrenching video, wasn't that? But I'm here to tell you that in the midst of all that, God is doing some amazing things in Cambodia. So I'm here to tell you about the last 4 years of my life. I've been living in Southeast Asia. I just recently moved back to America. And I had the chance to visit Cambodia in college for a summer. And then immediately after college, I moved there. And I want to share a little bit about my trip in college. I know a lot of you out there are in college right now, and you might relate to where I was at that point in my life. And then I'll share about when I actually moved there. And where it all began for me was first and foremost in the scriptures. There's so many scriptures that have inspired me, but this one in particular changed my entire life. It says in Genesis 1:27, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." You ever read the scriptures sometimes and you just have like a light bulb moment, like an epiphany moment where the truth of God it almost descends upon you? I remember in my freshman year in college I read this scripture and I was just knocked off my feet. The creator of the universe, our God, the Lord of Lords, took everything that makes him who he is, all the beautiful, the majestic, the glorious, the eternal things that make God God. He used some of that, and he made you. And he made me. And he made everyone in this world that way. Do you realize how special that makes you? Do you realize how special you are because of that? And my dream in life, my number one goal is I just want to see God, and I just want to see his glory and just be in awe. And so I thought if I could go, to a different country and serve the poor in some way, I would see God in amazing ways that I had never seen before. And so after my sophomore year in college, I decided to go to Cambodia for the summer. And so I went to Cambodia, so this is Cambodia. It's off the border of Thailand and Vietnam. And there's the mean streets of Cambodia there. I had the privilege of working with these wonderful women for that summer. My friend of mine, Rachel, there in the middle, she started this social enterprise to work with women who were in really difficult situations to help them to get jobs so that they could support their families. And so I went, she was teaching these women how to make clothes out of recycled products so that they could sell the clothes to tourists and different things like that so that they could support their families. And I went basically to help them open up a shop so that they could run a business, and make some money so they can support their families. It was really cool to be able to do that. I went and visited the women where they live. And I saw this adorable baby boy sitting on his bike. I had to take a picture of him. This is Malang on a moto with her entire family. So you Cambodians can fit a lot on a motorbike. It's amazing. This is the Phnom Penh Church. I love the Phnom Penh Church. One of my favorite churches in the world. This is the Liu family. The Liu family, they live in Hong Kong now. At the time, they were running the Sienna Hospital of Hope Worldwide. And one really intense story about Dan and Alexa there, and their two sons. One crazy story about Dan is Rachel and I were trying to open up this shop, right, to support the women. And we didn't have all the money that we needed to open up the shop, okay, to pay rent and to support the women so that they could support their families. And we're kind of freaking out, like, what do we do? And so we go to Dan, or at church, we saw Dan, and we're talking to him. And Dan says, hey, what can I pray for? Is there anything I can pray for? And we jokingly said, $2,000 would be awesome, Dan. And so he's the kind of serious guy. So he says, all right, I'm going to pray for that. I'm not kidding you. That same week, we got an order for exactly $2,000 worth of product. And the person that made the order paid us in advance. So we could pay rent, and we could make sure that the women were taken care of. Like, God does these amazing things in the developing world that it's so cool to be a part of it. So, after those 2 months, between my sophomore and my junior year, I went back to America, back to college. Go Matadors! So at this point, I had a kind of a vision for my life, right? And this is kind of how it was going to go. I was going to finish college. I was going to become successful as I possibly could in America, and then someday down the line, I would use, my talents, my success, or whatever to go and serve the poor and to try to do as many glorious things for God as I could possibly do, because I just want to glorify God, right? I just want to see God, and I want to glorify Him. And so my senior year, I landed a job. Before I even graduated, I landed what I thought was a pretty good job, making more money than I had ever made. And so that's not actually my office, but it's a picture I found on Google. And so I'm working, I'm like in the back of my mind, like, okay, I'm on my way towards being successful so that I can glorify God. Like a few months after I started this job, I started to hate this job. It was terrible. My boss, it was tough to work with my boss. The work was tedious. And so 6 months after I got this job, I got fired from this job. All right? And so I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh. How am I going to glorify God? I can't even keep a job. How am I going to help people in Cambodia? I can't even help myself in America. And so, I'm sitting there, I just feel like a total failure. And it occurred to me, why don't I just go to Cambodia right when I graduate? And it didn't really seem like that good of an idea, because I didn't really have that much money saved up. I felt like a failure, but I was just, hey, why don't I try? So a guy that I had met while I was there that summer, his name's Kevin O'Brien, he was working on a few projects that I knew about. And so I emailed him and just said, hey, Kevin, if you have anything, if you can hire me to help in some way, you don't need to pay me that much, I just want to go out and serve. And Kevin emailed me back and he said, well, I can't give you a job, but if you come out and you volunteer, there's like a 50% chance that I could give you a job. And the last line on his email was, how's your faith, bro? And I'm telling you, my faith was not strong, but my dislike of corporate America was extremely strong. Alright, so I'm starting to think, like, okay, maybe I should do this, but it still didn't feel like a good idea. And Dan Liu, if you remember Dan Liu, the guy that prays for money and falls from heaven, he just happened to be in town for a Hope Worldwide conference, okay? And so I found out he was in town, and I was just like, I gotta find Dan, I gotta get his advice, what do I do? And so I tracked Dan down, I bought him dinner, and I just said, Dan, please tell me what to do. And I'm pouring out my heart. Dan, I just want to glorify God and do amazing things for God, but I'm not successful, I'm a failure, maybe I should go to Cambodia, maybe I shouldn't, I don't know what to do. And Dan's just kind of listening to me. And then he waits for me to finish, and he says, you know what, Drew? I'm pretty sure sure that God has His glory completely taken care of. What you need to do is just stop, open your eyes, open your ears, and God's going to show you all the glorious things that He's going to do. And I'm saying this is like a huge paradigm shift. What? God doesn't need me to glorify Him? How stupid am I, right? So now it was obvious. I got to go to Cambodia. If I don't go, then I'm going to miss all the amazing things that God's going to do. So I decided to go, and I think for any of you that have a dream to want to go out and serve the poor, I can promise you it's never going to feel like exactly the right time. Because you've got your life here, you've got things you're working on here, it's never going to feel like exactly the right time. But if you take faithful steps in the direction of your dreams, God will make it very obvious to you what you should do. And a week before I actually went to Cambodia, a family in the church invited me over for dinner, and Dexter and Bella Alcedo, and they told me, hey, we really believe in what you're doing. We want you to last as long as you can out there, so here's $1,000. So that was cool, right? And I just knew, God started to build my faith that going to Cambodia was the right reason. So back we are on the mean streets of Cambodia. Riding a moto in Cambodia is like my favorite thing to do in the world. So when I got there, I was working with Kevin, the guy that I was emailing, and he had a couple projects he was working on. One was this warehouse where we were gathering medical supplies, and that organizations would donate. Sometimes there'd be too much, so we would take the excess medical supplies, and we would just go around the countryside and find hospitals that needed free supplies. So I got to kind of go around and give out free supplies, which was pretty cool. I lived in the back of the warehouse. That was my room. And so what Kevin didn't tell me until after I got there was that he was working on a proposal. He was working on a proposal to start a new nonprofit organization. And the whole goal of this organization was going to be to set up medical clinics in the countryside to help the poor. Okay, and so I got there, and so I found out about it. We started helping him with this proposal. He had a connection with a very wealthy businessman in Japan. And so a couple months after I got there, he flew to Japan. He came back from Japan with a guaranteed budget of $1 million. To help the poor. Not just for 1 year, but for 7 years. This guy gave us $1 million to help the poor. That doesn't happen every day. Where a dude just gives you $1 million and says, here, go serve the poor. But that's what we were presented with, which is pretty cool. So we started going around the countryside in Cambodia looking for where we were going to start this first clinic. And so we're looking, we visited a few places, and one of the places that we visited was in Battambang. Battambang's up there on the top left. And we're in Battambang looking around, okay, is this the place to start the clinic? And there's a really amazing trauma hospital in Battambang that gives free trauma care to the poor. And there's a lot of trauma in the countryside in Cambodia. People get into accidents when they're working in the fields. There's moto accidents. There's a lot of landmines from the wars back in the 1970s that are out there that people step on. And so this trauma hospital was very important. And so we wanted to meet with this guy. So we met with him, just trying to get his advice. Where should we set up our first project? And so we meet with the guy. And a week later, we're praying to God, make it obvious what we should do with this budget that we've been given, that you've entrusted us with. And the director of the hospital that we met with, he calls us a week later, and very urgent sound in his voice is, we got to talk. So we talked to him, and he says, my organization is an Italian organization that he worked for, is shutting down. We're running out of money. We're shutting down. Do you want to take over my hospital? And so we asked him, well, how much does it cost to run your hospital? Guess how much it costs to run his hospital for 1 year? $1 million, exactly. So God made it totally obvious what we should do with the money. So we took over the trauma hospital. This is, it wasn't really a grand opening ceremony. It was more like a grand not closing ceremony. So it's the Honda Emergency Hospital. The name of the organization is the Honda Foundation. So I got to work at the hospital. I was running non-medical operations. Don't worry, I wasn't performing surgery or anything like that. So this is the men's ward. Sometimes I would just walk the hospital and just be in complete awe of God. We we didn't organize any of that. We just happened to, this rich guy just happened to give us money, and we just happened to meet with the director of this hospital, and it just happened to be 2 months before they were going to shut down. Like, God totally made all of it happen. And I would just walk and just be so glad that these people had a place to go to for trauma care out in Cambodia. These are 2 patients outside my office. This is the house that I lived in down the street from the hospital. This is the room I lived in. These are my roommates. That snake up on the top left, I came home after church one Sunday and it was eating a bat in my house. And it's not happening in America, let me tell you. In Cambodia, you eat spiders. So, this is, you guys like that one, don't you? So, this is Dr. Cam and I unloading a truck of supplies at the hospital. So, wow. Like, if my goal is to see God do glorious things, He has gone over and above anything that I could ever have imagined, right? And, I mean, getting the budget to start the Honda Foundation, taking over the hospital, I mean, I was just in awe of all that was going on. But I'm going to tell you something. All of that wasn't even the best thing that happened. All right? The best thing that happened was the church that we planted in Battambang. Nice. So, you know, when you're working at a hospital, you're taking care of physical needs, and that's very important. But when the patient leaves, they still have a soul. And everyone's soul needs care. Everyone needs love. And so when we took over the hospital, there were a number of vacant positions that needed to be filled. So we thought, heck, let's hire some disciples and plant a church. Like, why not, right? So this is the mission team. I love these people so much. I miss them so much. In March of 2012, we planted the church, and I didn't really know how a church planting in the Cambodian countryside was going to go. You know, it's a Buddhist country. People, you know, not everyone. I just didn't think that people were going to be that interested in Jesus, and we just started inviting random people in town to our house church. We were having church at a house. And I'm telling you, every Sunday, this house was jam-packed. I don't know why. All I know is that God is amazing. And so we had a jam-packed house church every Sunday. We got some Bible studies going on here. Pick there next to the wall, he was our first baptism. And I wish I could tell you about everybody that I met in Cambodia. I'm going to tell you a few of my favorites. This is Chi Wan. Chi Wan, she was a patient at the hospital, and she, 13-year-old girl, she was working in the fields, should have been in school, but life doesn't always go the way it should. She was working in the fields, she got her arm caught in a machine that they were using to harvest, and her arm ended up having to get amputated. And so she's at the hospital by herself. Her family wasn't even there. And when the disciples found out that there was this little girl who had just lost her arm at the hospital by herself, they rushed to her side and just took care of her and spent time with her. And it was tough for Chi Wan for a while, but when she was able to get out of the hospital, she was around the church 24/7. I mean, her family wasn't in the picture, her extended family sort of was, but she basically got adopted by the church. And seeing the church just put its arms around a little girl who had just gone through a traumatic event in her life, it was so cool to see, and I just love seeing her smile. This is Sotia and Pasai. They lead the church in Battambang, and their story is pretty amazing. So when they were young Christians, about 15 years or so ago in Phnom Penh, they fell in love and they wanted to get married. But back in the day, and still sometimes today, families will arrange marriages. And so Pasai, her family had already arranged for her to marry this other guy, but she didn't want to marry this guy. And so her family basically ended up kidnapping her from her home and took her out of town and kept her in this house and said, "You are going to marry this man." And she didn't want to marry this guy. She wanted to marry Sotia. She wanted to marry a Christian. And so she broke out of the house and went back into town so that she could be with the church and so she could marry Sotia. They're telling me this story. And I'm just like, guys, we gotta make a movie out of this. And now they lead the church of God. They are a talented couple. They could be, I think, pretty successful in Cambodia, but they're doing ministry work. They're like the Cambodian Hickmans. I'm telling you, they're so cool. So this is Sokanya on the day of his restoration. Sokanya, he was a disciple in a church in Kampong Cham, which is another city in Cambodia. And he left the church, he left God, and he went to Thailand. And he basically just started living a very crazy life in Thailand. And he hit rock bottom. He lost all his money. He hit complete rock bottom. And so he came back from Thailand to Cambodia not knowing what to do with his life. And so he decided to join the Cambodian military. He joined the Cambodian military and they stationed him in Battambang, just a couple months before we planted the church. And I don't know if you're familiar with the parable of the lost son, but in the parable of the lost son, the son, he wants his inheritance from his father so that he can go off and live this great life. He goes off, he squanders his inheritance, he hits rock bottom, and he has to leave the town he was in, and he gets a job in the countryside, doing a job, the terrible job, and his father sees him a long ways off, and his father runs out to get his son. And I remember when we were studying the Bible with Sokanya to restore him, we realized that that's exactly what happened to Sokanya. Sokanya, he wanted to come back to the church, but he couldn't quite do it, and he got stationed in Battambang. And so what did God do? He ran out through the church and planted a church in Battambang so that he could save the soul of Sokanya. And in the parable, this is the day that he was restored. And in the parable of the lost son, when the father brings the son back, he says, "Rejoice, my son has returned." And he puts this robe over his shoulders. And so we didn't tell him he was going to do this, that we were going to do this, but when he was up giving his testimony to the church, we bought this giant towel at the market, and we put it over his shoulders like the father did the son. And he just burst into tears in front of the whole church. So cool to see that. So here I am back at the hospital working away. And needless to say, seeing God do all of these amazing things, I can honestly say that my first year in Cambodia was the best year of my life. And the amazing thing about our dreams is that, an amazing thing about life is that I think God's will and free will, they run concurrently together. And so when we dream, God dreams even bigger. And we get to build a life together with God. But the part of that is a little bit scary is that sometimes God's dreams aren't exactly the same as our dreams, for good or for bad. And my first year in Cambodia was the best year of my life. My second year in Cambodia was one of the toughest years of my life. Okay? Things just started to go wrong. I was the only American single brother there, so I started to get really alone. I didn't feel like anyone understood me. Alright, so I would get alone. I started to get really selfish. I realized how terrible my character is. When you're in a mission team, it's give all of the time. And I was not prepared for that at all. So I started to get really selfish. I started to feel really alone. I started to get really sick. So I was living in Cambodia like a Cambodian, but I still had an American immune system, and I often forgot about this. And so I would get sick. My second year, I pretty much was sick the entire year. The first thing I got was this really bad throat virus that lasted about a month, and I couldn't eat much. It hurt really bad. I would get these fevers in the night, these gnarly fevers, and I'd wake up in the morning with these red spots on my chest and my arms. Like, what is going on? One time we were playing soccer, and one of the soccer fields that we played at, there was this pool of just sewage, poopy water, all right? And the ball fell into this water, and no one wanted to go get it. But I was like, hey, I'll go get it. The water only looks ankle deep, so I step in the water, and I fall shoulder deep into this water. And I had this rash that covered my whole body for like 2 weeks. And then the final straw was I I ate this salad that I should not have eaten, and I got dysentery. Alright, and you can, like, if you don't treat it, you can die from dysentery. So I'm sitting there, lying on the hospital bed, and I'm just praying, Father, if I die right now, I would feel a lot better. And so, I'm sitting here just, God, what are you doing? I came to serve. Why is this happening to me? Why am I getting sick? I just want to help, but and I was really sick physically, but I was even more sick spiritually, and I didn't even realize it. It basically got to the point where physically I couldn't really stay there, and so I had to leave Cambodia. It was one of the toughest decisions that I've ever made in my life, to leave Cambodia, to leave my dream. And I didn't want to go back to America yet, and so I moved to Bangkok, Thailand, where I was able to recover and be a part of the church there. And it was in Thailand that I came across a scripture that really completely altered my view of what God's glory is really all about. And I want to share it with you. It's in John 12. It says, "Now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. 'Sir,' they said, 'we would like to see Jesus.'" So I already relate to these Greeks, right? They want to see Jesus. And what do I want to do? I want to see God, right? I want to see God's image. And Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." People are coming to Jesus, and they want to see glorious things too. And Jesus has a completely different definition of glory than just about anyone else in the world is going to define it as. You know what he defines it as? Dying. Would you define glory that way? I sure don't. I sure wouldn't. When my definition of God's glory was God doing awesome things that I want to see happen. Right? And I think that's not inaccurate. God does awesome things, and he will do awesome things to glorify himself. But a lot of us in our generation, you know what we really want? We just want an experience. We just want to experience amazing things. And once again, that's not necessarily wrong. But if you're really not ready to die to yourself, to sacrifice, to live for something greater than your own self, you're never really going to understand what God's glory is all about. And this was a tough lesson for me to learn. God had to take me away from my dream. He had to make me sick for a year. He had to really mold me so that I could understand what this meant. And I'm still learning what it means. And so I urge you, if you have that desire to want to go serve and to want to do awesome things, do it. But realize that you got to die to yourself. So the cool thing about God is he does very much so have his glory completely under control. This is the Battambang Church in December, this past December. And this is, the Christmas picture. You can see Santa Claus there. Santa Claus visits Cambodia too. This is the hospital. The hospital is doing great. This is on the day that they got more land donated to them to add more medical services, which was so cool. And so I just want to end with a couple points, and that is to dream big. Dream big for God, and God will take those dreams and he'll make them even better. And go. It's not always going to feel like the right time, but go. But when you go with a heart of humility and sacrifice. And it will be glorious, and you will see God in the most amazing ways. And I'll end with this. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Thank you very much.